Hey everyone, I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the next terrifying upload. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more of the content you love. Working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour corner store has its ups and downs. The pay isn't great. Dealing with drunks and tweakers at 3 a.m. gets old real fast, and staying up all night really messes with your sleep schedule. But it's a steady job, and something about the eerie quiet of the deserted store after midnight has always appealed to me in a strange way. That quiet used to feel peaceful, but lately it's taken on an uneasy edge whenever I walk past that door in the stockroom, the one that's always locked, with no label or anything to indicate what might be behind it. When I first started working here a few months back, I asked Jerry, the day manager, what gives with that mystery door. He just shook his head and mumbled something about old storage, then changed the subject. Weird reaction, but I figured it was none of my business and left it alone after that. At least until a couple weeks ago, when we had that bad thunderstorm that knocked the power out for half the night. I was sitting behind the counter reading a magazine by flashlight, trying to ignore the stuffy heat with no AC, when I thought I heard a weird knocking sound. At first I brushed it off as storm noise, but when it happened again, 3 loud thumps in quick succession, I realized it was coming from the stockroom. My first thought was that someone had gotten trapped in there when the power cut out. I grabbed my flashlight and headed to the stockroom to investigate. The knocking grew louder as I approached the mystery door, and I reached out to try the handle. Just then my coworker Dan showed up and slapped my hand away. He looked freaked out, insisting that I never, ever open that door, no matter what I might hear coming from inside. Before I could ask why, the power came back on and the knocking stopped. Dan refused to explain further, but the grave look in his eyes was enough to dissuade me from asking about it again. A few nights later, restocking the cooler in the wee hours of the morning, the knocking returned. It was just a single knock this time, tentative but urgent. I stared at the mystery door across the stockroom, a chill running down my spine. Could someone really be trapped in there after all this time? Over the next several weeks, the sporadic knocking became a nightly occurrence, always muffled by the thick door, but unmistakable nonetheless. Then I started finding the notes. At first I didn't know what to make of the crumpled pieces of paper appearing in various spots around the store, under my windshield wiper, tucked into the magazine rack, even one sitting right on top of the register when I came back from a bathroom break. But they all contained the same 2 handwritten words over and over, "Let me out." I wanted to confront Dan or Jerry about it, but what would I even say? Hey, so, what's the deal with those creepy notes and knocks coming from that room you refuse to tell me anything about? No, better to keep my head down and my mouth shut if I want to stay employed. But the knocking and notes persists, growing more frequent by the shift. My nerves are frayed from lack of sleep, as I now lay awake during the day wondering about the true nature of that locked door mere yards from where I spent 40 hours a week in the dead of night. The possibilities swirl endlessly in my mind. A deranged previous employee being held against their will, or some unfathomable eldritch presence the management is keeping secret for sinister reasons. Last night, for the first time, the knocking had a different rhythm and intensity than before. No longer the hesitant taps or desperate pounding of previous weeks. Instead, it was a slow, heavy, relentless banging that shook the entire stockroom walls. It went on for hours, non-stop, like whatever was behind that door was putting its full weight and strength into escape. As I sit here waiting for my shift to end, I can feel the knocking starting up once more, reverberating through the store, through my bones, an insistent herald of impending something. My flashlight sits heavy in my pocket, and the mystery key, stolen from Jerry's office just this morning, burns a hole in my palm. Tonight may finally be the night I learn the true nature of what waits behind that locked door. Whether I can handle the answer remains to be seen. The knocking builds and builds until I can't take it anymore. Gripping the stolen key tight in my fist, I march into the stockroom with a determination I don't actually feel. This could be a huge mistake, but I have to know. At the locked door, I hesitate only a moment before shoving the key into the rusty lock and turning it. The mechanism resists but finally gives way with a heavy clunk. That sound is like a starter pistol, setting loose a barrage of frenzied knocking from the other side. I steel my nerves and yank open the door. A dense cloud of dust swirls out, obscuring whatever is inside. Waving it away, I shine my flashlight beam into the dim room. Shelves line the walls, cluttered with boxes and stacks of papers. The air is heavy with an odd, sickly sweet odor. In the middle of the floor lies a hunched figure, clutching its head. As the dust clears, details emerge. Dirt-caked clothes, tangled hair, yellowed fingernails scraping at the floor. It's a person. Just some homeless person who found their way in here somehow. Relief floods through me at this mundane explanation. "Hey, are you okay? How long have you been trapped in here?" I ask gently. No response. The knocking has ceased, replaced by an unnerving silence. I take a cautious step forward. That's when the figure's head jerks up, face emerging from behind greasy curtains of hair. Sunken eyes glare with an unsettling intensity. The mouth splits into a grin, revealing teeth filed to jagged points. I stumble back in shock. Adrenaline screams through my veins as the figure lets out an inhuman shriek and scrambles toward me with preternatural speed. I slam the door shut just as the thing throws itself against it. The heavy door holds, though the frame splinters slightly under the impact. More shrieks and banging erupt, but the door holds. I back away, hyperventilating. What the hell was that thing? Why was it locked in there? And why does the management want it kept secret? None of it makes sense, but one thing is certain. I can't keep working here. Not with that monster just one locked door away. I hurry out to my car, tosses my apron and name tag into a dumpster as I go. Let them find someone else to work the graveyard shift. I just pray whoever takes my place has the sense not to touch that damned key. As I peel out of the parking lot, the thing's shrieks follow me into the night. I don't look back. Time to start a new chapter somewhere far from this place. Maybe I'll finally sign up for those classes I've been thinking about. It's never too late for a fresh start. It was just another normal night for me, working the graveyard shift as a security guard at the big warehouse on the edge of town. I've been at this job for a few years now, and most nights are pretty uneventful. I do my rounds, check the cameras, and try not to fall asleep at my desk. The work can get monotonous, but it pays the bills. This particular night started out like any other. I clocked in at 11 p.m., grabbed a cup of coffee from the break room, and settled in to monitor the security feeds. As usual, the warehouse was still and quiet. Nothing ever really happens here overnight, just the occasional noises of the building settling or machinery running. It was around 2 a.m. when I first noticed it. I was scanning the camera views when I thought I saw movement in the back corner of the warehouse near aisle F-3. Just a slight shifting of the shadows. I stared at the screen but didn't see anything else. Figuring it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, I continued with my duty. Over the next few nights, I noticed the shadows moving again, always in aisle F-3. At first it was subtle, just a hint of motion in my peripheral vision, but the activity steadily increased. By the end of the week, I could clearly see a dark, human-sized shape sliding between the shelves and stacks of boxes. It seemed to dart just out of view of the security cameras, lurking in the background. I decided to investigate the situation myself. During my rounds one night, I made my way carefully down aisle F-3, flashlight in hand. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss, but as I walked the length of the row, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows. Whipping around, my light revealed nothing but stillness. Yet the sense of another presence did not leave me. Uneasy, I reported the incidents to my supervisor the next day. He was skeptical, suggesting I was just seeing things from lack of sleep or too much caffeine. But I knew what I had experienced. Something or someone was stalking me from the darkness when I worked alone at night. The activity continued to escalate no matter how carefully I monitored the aisle on the security feeds. Finally, I decided to review archived footage from that area, hoping to spot something concrete. What I discovered made my blood run cold. There on the screen, barely visible in the dim warehouse lighting, was an elongated, human-shaped shadow. It darted furtively between the shelves, blending into the surrounding gloom. I could just make out its silhouette each time it emerged from cover. No features were discernible, only shifting darkness in the form of a man. I watched its sinister movements night after night on the old footage. Always it remained on the periphery, obscured from clear view, but the shape was unmistakable. Somehow this phantom shadow had been stalking me from the darkness for weeks. My nerves on edge, I continued working each creepy night shift. The warehouse that had once seemed merely boring was now ominous. I dreaded walking past aisle F-3, though I tried not to show fear. The shadow continued its nerve-wracking lurking, growing ever bolder. One night it crept so close I could have sworn I felt cold breath on my neck. Whirling around, I saw nothing, but I knew with dreadful certainty that it had been right behind me. The malice radiating from that aisle was almost palpable. Terrified yet determined, I resolved to get proof and stop this malevolent stalker. I set up a new security camera with night vision focused on the troubled aisle. For many hours of footage, it revealed nothing. Then finally, on playback, I spotted it, a humanoid shadow detaching from the greater darkness and slinking towards the camera. Before the lens it paused and two pale glowing eyes glared up eerily at me. Shuddering, I saved the footage to show my employers and the police. Surely this dangerous trespassing and harassment had to cease. Yet I dreaded whatever confrontation lay ahead. This mysterious entity seemed cunning and perhaps inhuman, but I could not stand guard alone each night with that phantom stalker in the darkness. I had to take back control of my warehouse, no matter the secrets slipping through its aisles. The next night I came prepared. Along with the normal security tools, I brought a powerful flashlight, holy water, and a crucifix, anything I could think of for protection and to potentially repel evil. I didn't know what that thing was, but I knew I had to take a stand. At midnight, I entered the warehouse with caution, immediately heading towards aisle F-3. My flashlight pierced through the gloom as I scanned the area. Nothing. Minutes ticked by in tense silence. Just when I thought maybe it wasn't coming tonight, a shape detached from the darkness. There it was, the humanoid shadow creeping steadily towards me. I steeled my nerve and stood my ground. It paused, pale eyes glowing eerily in the blackness beneath its hood. Summoning my courage, I splashed the holy water in its direction and held up the crucifix, reciting a prayer. The reaction was instantaneous. The shadow let out an unearthly shriek and recoiled from the sacred symbols. It pressed itself against the shelves as if wanting to melt back into oblivion. I continued chanting prayers and approaching step by step. Right before my eyes, the solid shadow seemed to unravel at the edges. It writhed and contorted, still shrieking in rage or pain, but it could not escape the purifying light I shined upon it. With a final inhuman wail, the phantom dispersed into wisps of black smoke. The warehouse immediately felt lighter, as if a oppressive gloom had lifted. I stood shaking in the now empty aisle. The thing that had stalked me all those nights was finally banished. Just to be sure, I sprinkled more holy water in every corner. Then I got out of there, done with graveyard shifts. I had defeated the darkness, but someone else could take over monitoring those shadowy aisles from now on. It was my first week as the new night guard at the museum, and I was still getting used to the long, quiet nights patrolling the dark, cavernous halls. At first, I enjoyed having the place to myself, being surrounded by all the famous works of art and historical artifacts. It felt like I had stepped back in time. But then, things started getting strange. On my second night, I could have sworn one of the medieval knight statues had shifted to face a different direction. I figured it had to be my tired eyes playing tricks, or just a lapse in memory. These halls all start to look the same after hours of patrols. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing inside me. By the third night, I was positive the ancient vases and sculptures were moving when I wasn't looking. Pieces seemed ever so slightly out of place, not where I remembered them. A Greek urn was now on the opposite pedestal. The arms of a Roman bust pointed a different way. Again, I doubted myself, wondering if the eerie atmosphere was messing with my head. But there was no denying the creeping sense that I was being watched. On night 4, there was no mistaking it. The exhibits were shifting on their own. While doing my rounds, I turned and saw 2 Egyptian sarcophagi standing upright, when previously they had been lying horizontally. It was as if mummies were about to emerge from them and shamble towards me at any moment. I felt my heart race as I rushed past, not wanting to linger another second. In the medieval section, knight statues creaked and groaned as they turned to follow me with their hollow eyes. One even raised its sword as I passed by. The faded paintings seemed to watch me, their subjects peering out from the canvas, gazing intensely as if to warn me away. I couldn't wait to get out of there. By the 5th night, I dreaded my shift, afraid of what strange occurrence I'd witness next. The statues and mannequins seemed to inch closer to my path each night. Even with the lights on, the figures cast looming shadows that shifted and swayed as if they were alive. I could feel their cold stone eyes tracking my every step. I started taking a different route on my rounds to avoid the more frightening displays, especially in the Egyptian wing. But it did little good. No section was safe. I'd turn a corner and see a menacing scarecrow from the folk art exhibit blocking the hall, even though it had been on the other side of the room minutes earlier. Violent tribal masks seemed ready to leap off the walls and attack. The final straw came during night 12, when I walked smack into one of the faceless mannequins standing right in my path near the modern art section. I shone my flashlight ahead and saw several more had congregated together in the shadows, lurking motionlessly. My heart nearly stopped as icy fear gripped me. I turned and ran, not caring if I was abandoning my post. I had to get out of. I barricaded myself in the security office until sunrise, praying they couldn't get in. As soon as morning staff arrived, I quit on the spot, leaving the museum keys behind. I was grateful to put those living nightmares behind me forever. I still don't know what sinister force animated the exhibits after dark, but I have no intention of ever finding out. I avoided the museum after that, worried I'd see one of those menacing figures on display during the day and panic. I was too anxious to walk near any statues or mannequins elsewhere too. Anything human-shaped unnerved me. Weeks later, I was at an outdoor fair when a street performer dressed as a living statue approached me, his body painted silver. I felt that same paralyzing terror and had to flee the scene. Months have passed now, but I still get uneasy around lifelike sculptures and figures. I inspect every dark corner and shadow cautiously wherever I go at night, worried something will move. Bright lights and crowded spaces are my only refuge. I doubt those fears will ever fully fade. All I can do now is leave those haunted museum halls far behind me and warn others to avoid that place after night falls. Because once the lights go out, the only thing on display is horror. The shadows come alive, and they hunger for human fear. Stay far away, unless you want to witness your worst nightmare stalking you in the darkness. I experienced it, and still feel that chilling terror like icy fingers on my neck. Please believe my warning and steer clear of that living museum of horrors. Working the graveyard shift can really mess with your head. The long, quiet nights play tricks on your mind. But some of the weird things I've seen during my time on the night shift make me wonder if it's all just in my imagination. It started a few weeks ago. I was on my regular 2 a.m. snack break, wandering half asleep over to the vending machines in the break room. As usual, I punched in the code for my favorite snack, salty peanuts, to keep me going for the next few hours. But when I looked in the retrieval bin, there wasn't a bag of peanuts waiting for me. Instead, an old iron key lay at the bottom, covered in a layer of dust and grit. Confused, I looked back at the machine. All the regular snacks were still in their normal spots, neatly organized behind the smudged glass. But a new selection had appeared at the bottom row. Mystery items, the label read, in an eerie flickering red text. Figuring the machine had just glitched and dispensed something left over in its gears, I pocketed the key and didn't think much else of it. The next night, though, I noticed the mystery items were still there, the red text pulsating faintly. Feeling adventurous in my exhausted stupor, I put in $1 and pressed the button to see what I would get. This time, a small, empty glass vial dropped down, landing with a soft thud. As I held it up to the dim light, I could see traces of some kind of thick, rusted residue inside. I slipped it into my pocket next to the key and got back to work. Over the next week, I found myself almost eagerly anticipating my snack breaks. Each night, the machine would dispense another strange object from the mystery row. First a brittle old photograph of men in lab coats, then a tarnished locket with a withered flower inside, then a small, moth-eaten doll with one button eye missing. I started collecting the items in my locker, although I had no idea what they meant or why I kept them. One night, as I made my usual rounds, I noticed one of the supply closet doors down an empty hallway was ajar. Peeking inside, the small room was pitch black except for the beam of my flashlight. The shelves, normally packed tightly with office supplies, were completely empty. Just layers of thick dust. When I asked my CO workers the next day if they knew anything about it, they all swore the supplies had been fully stocked at the start of their shift. The next item to come from the vending machine was a rusty old key, slightly different from the first, but still in the same intricate, old-fashioned style. On a hunch, I went back to the supply closet and tried it in the lock. To my surprise, it clicked right open with a deep, resonant thud, like the turning of a heavy vault. The shelves were still bare inside, but as I carefully searched the back wall, knocking on each brick, I found a section that sounded strangely hollow. Working at the bricks with a crowbar from the maintenance closet, I was able to pry off a false panel, revealing a hidden door. The doorway exhaled a cold, musty breath as decades of sealed air escaped. Beyond it was a staircase leading down into a basement I never knew existed. The air was cold and stale, like no one had been down there in decades. Using my phone's flashlight to see, I slowly made my way through the spider webs and layers of thick, undisturbed dust. The creaking wooden steps threatened to collapse under each footfall. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a large room. Makeshift lab equipment, rusty file cabinets, and stacks of moldy boxes cluttered the area. But most chilling was a heavy iron door at the back. A small peek through the barred window revealed some kind of abandoned medical room with an imposing examination chair and trays of sinister-looking instruments. Shaken by my discovery, I rushed out of the basement and replaced the false wall panel. This was bigger than I could handle. After that night, I decided I needed to take my findings to the authorities and let them uncover the full, disturbing truth. I didn't want to know what other nightmares this company had buried down there. When I returned to the vending machine the next night, hesitantly hoping for some normalcy, the mystery row was finally empty. Just to be sure, I bought the last mystery item, half expecting another relic to appear. But this time, a normal bag of peanuts rolled out and landed with a soft thump. Maybe now the building's secrets could finally be laid to rest. Still, it's hard to look at that vending machine the same way. Who knows what other strange visions it could have in store, just waiting for the right person to unlock them in the lonely hours of the graveyard shift. I suppose I'll never know the full story behind what happened in this place. But for now, my vending machine mystery has come to a close. It's given me enough disturbing clues to fuel my imagination on a lifetime of long, uneventful nights on the job. At least I can look forward to eating my peanuts in peace again, listening to the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. Still, I may start packing my own snacks from now on, just to be safe. Wouldn't want any more surprises dropping down when I'm tired and alone. Working the night shift as a cabbie in a small town has its quirks. The fares come few and far between, especially on weeknights. Mostly it's just bringing heavily intoxicated folks home from the few bars still open at that hour. But every once in a while, I'll get a fare that's outside the ordinary. And some of those have been downright unsettling. Take what happened just a few weeks back. It was nearly 3 a.m. on a Tuesday and I was fighting to stay awake in that post-midnight lull. I'd parked outside the all-night diner to grab a coffee, hoping the jolt of caffeine would keep me going till the sun came up. As I walked back to my cab, a hand shot up to flag me down. Turning, I saw a woman, 30s maybe, plain dress and a haunted look in her eyes. She asked if I could take her out to Ridgewood, a neighborhood on the edge of town. I nodded and held the door for her. As we drove, she didn't say a word or even look at me, just stared out the window into the darkness. When we got to Ridgewood, I followed her vague directions down a couple side streets till we were in a part of the neighborhood I'd never been before. No streetlights, overgrown lots, creepy old houses all shuttered and dark. I pulled over where she told me, but when I turned to ask where to exactly, the backseat was empty. No sign of the woman. The meter was still running, so I knew she'd been there. I got out and searched around, calling "ma'am" into the night. Nothing. Not a sound beside the wind. I don't mind admitting it rattled me pretty good. Tried to convince myself I just nodded off and dreamt picking her up. But the next night it happened again. This time a middle-aged guy, suit and briefcase. Same deal, silent ride out to Ridgewood and then just gone. After that, it kept happening. Every few nights I'd get a fare request from that block downtown that would take me out to that same deserted part of Ridgewood, only to have them disappear. Then things got weirder. The passengers started talking to me, saying strange things, personal things they shouldn't have known. One heavy-set woman with jet black hair muttered my childhood nickname under her breath the whole ride, smirking to herself. A tall, bald man told me my wife's birthday was next Tuesday and he hoped she liked the present I got her. I never told him I was married, let alone my wife's birthday. It was like they were playing mind games, showing they knew things about my life only close family would know. The last one really got to me. A girl, maybe 19 tops, cute in a haunted way. The moment she got in the cab, a chill went down my spine. As we headed out of town, she whispered without looking at me, "She's not really your daughter, is she?" I almost swerved off the road. I don't have a daughter, but she was referring to my niece, who I'm very close with and treat like my own child. This stranger casually referenced a painful family secret almost no one knows. I was rattled. Who were these people? How did they know so much about me? I became convinced something evil was going on in that abandoned corner of Ridgewood. I even went to the police, but they shrugged it off. Told me I must have been talking in my sleep about personal things and forgetting passengers who slipped off without paying. They promised to patrol the area, but I could tell they thought I was a nutcase. Finally, I decided I had to go back there in the daylight and see for myself. So I drove out one morning, before my shift. In the light of day, it seemed like any quiet suburban neighborhood, nothing sinister. I walked around where I dropped them off each time. Dead-end street, decrepit old houses all vacant, boarded up and long forgotten. The deeper I explored, the creepier it felt, like the whole neighborhood was waiting, watching me. But in the end, nothing. Just an unsettling feeling I couldn't shake. I still don't know who those passengers were or how they knew so much about me. I switched to day shifts right after those bizarre experiences, hoping to leave the unease behind me. But still, late at night when I'm home alone, I sometimes feel like I'm being watched from the shadows. Just last week I was up late, unable to sleep, when the phone rang unexpectedly at 3 a.m. No one ever calls at that hour. Heart racing, I answered with a cautious, "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then, so softly I could barely hear it, a woman's voice whispered, "Ridgewood is waiting for you. before the line went dead. I sat stunned, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Had that just happened, or was I imagining things? I tried to convince myself it was just a wrong number or prank call, but deep down, I knew. Just like I know I'll never truly be free of those experiences in that ominous, beckoning neighborhood. Someday, be it temptation or compulsion that draws me back, I know I'll find myself driving down those dark, decrepit streets once. And this time, I fear whoever, or whatever, has been watching and waiting for me all this time in Ridgewood may finally reveal